The Sefer of Maccabeim Shelashi, 3rd Maccabees, chapter 1. Now, Philopator, on learning from those who had come back from Antiochus, had made himself master of the places which belonged to himself, sent orders to all his footmen and horsemen, took with him his sister Arsoni, and marched out as far as the parts of Raphia, where Antiochus and his forces encamped. And one Theodatus, intending to marry out of his design, took with him the bravest of the armies, who had been before committed to his trust by Ptolemy, and got through at night to the tent of Ptolemy, to kill him on his own responsibility, and so to end the war. But Dostheus, called the son of Dremulius, by birth a Yehudi, afterwards a renegade from the Torah and observance of the country, conveyed Ptolemy away and made an obscure person lie down in his stead in the tent. It befell this man to receive the fate which was meant for the other. A fierce battle then took place, and the men of Antiochus prevailing, Arsinoe continually went up and down the ranks, and with her disheveled hair, with tears and entreaties, begged the soldiers to fight manfully for themselves. Their children and their women promised that if they proved conquerors, she would give them 2 main of gold apiece. It thus fell out that the enemies were defeated in hand-to-hand encounter, and that many of them were taken prisoner. Having vanquished this attempt, the king then decided to proceed to the neighboring cities and encourage them. By doing this, and by making donations to their temples, he inspired his subjects with confidence. The Yehudim sent some of their council and their elders to him. The greetings, guest gifts, and congratulations of the past bestowed by them filled him with great eagerness to visit their city. Having arrived at Jerusalem, sacrificed and offered thank offerings to the great Gadol Elohim, and done whatsoever else was suitable to the sanctity of the place, and entered in the inner court. He was so struck with the magnificence of the place, and so wondered at the orderly arrangements of the temple, that he considered entering the sanctuary itself. And when they told him that this was not possible or permissible, none of the nation, no, not even the Kohanim, the priests in general, but only the supreme high priest, the Kohanim Hagadol of all, and he only once in a year, being allowed to go in, he would by no means give way. Then they read the Torah to him, but he persisted in obtruding himself, exclaiming that he ought to be allowed, and saying, "Be it that they were deprived of this honor, I ought not to be." And he put the question, why, when he entered all the temples, none of their priests who were present forbade him. He was thoroughly answered by someone that he did wrong to boast of this. Well, since I have done this, he said, be the cause that it may, shall I enter with or without your consent. And when the priests fell down in their sacred Kodesh vestments, imploring the great Elohim to come and help in time of need, and to avert the violence and the fierce aggressor. And when they filled the temple with lamentations and tears, then those who had been left behind in the city were scared and rushed forth, uncertain of the events. Betulas, virgins, who had been shut up within their chambers, came out with their mothers, scattering dust and ashes on their head, and filling the streets with outcries. Women, but recently separated off, left their bridal chambers, left the reserve that befitting them, and ran about the city in a disorderly manner. Newborn babies were deserted by their mothers or nurses who waited upon them, some here, some there, in houses or in fields. These now, under the ardor, which could not be checked, swarmed into Elion's temple, his house. Various were the prayers offered up by those who assembled in this place, and on account of the unholy attempt of the king. Along with these, there were some of the citizens who took courage and would not submit to his obstinacy and his intention of carrying out his purpose, calling out for arms, and to die bravely in defense of the Torah of their fathers. They created a great uproar in the place, and were with difficulty brought back by the aged and the elders to the stations of prayer which they had occupied before. During this time, the multitude kept on praying. The elders who surrounded the king strove in many ways to divert his haughty mind from the design which he had formed. He, in his hardened mood, insensible to all persuasion, was going on with the view of carrying out this design. Yet even his own officers, when they saw this, joined the Yehudim in an appeal to him who has all power to aid in the present crisis, and not wink at such overweening iniquity. Such was the frequency and the vehemency of the cry of the assembled crowd that an indescribable noise ensued. Not the men only, but the very walls and the floors seemed to resonate forth. All things preferring disillusion rather than to see the place defiled. 3rd Maccabees, chapter 2. Now was it that the high priest, the Kohanim Hagadol, Shimon, bowed his knees over against the Kodesh place and spread out his hands in reverent form, and uttered the following supplication, semicolon. O Yahweh, Yahweh, King of heaven, of Shamayim, and the ruler of the whole creation, Kodesh among the Kodesh, sole governor, El Shaddai, give ear to us who are oppressed by a wicked and profane one, who exalts in his confidence and strength. It is you, the creator of all, Yahweh of the universe, who are a righteous governor and judge all who act with pride and insolence. It is you who did destroy the former works of unrighteousness, along with whom were the giants, who trusted in their strength and hardihood, the Nephilim, by covering them with a measureless flood. It was you who did make the Sidonian, those who of exceeding iniquity, men notorious for their vices, and an example to after generations, when you did cover them with fire and brimstone. You did make known your power when you caused the bold Pharaoh, the enslaver of your people, to pass through the ordeal of many and diverse afflictions. And you rolled the depths of the sea over him when he made pursuit with chariots and with a multitude of followers, and gave safe passage to those who put their trust in you, Yahweh of the whole creation. These saw and felt the works of your hands and praised you, El Shaddai. You, O King Melech, when you created the illimitable and unmeasureless earth, did choose out this city. You did make this place Kodesh to Hashem, sacred to your name, albeit you need nothing. You did glorify it with your illustrious presence, and constructing it to the glory of your great and honorable name. And you did promise out of love to the people of Yisrael that should we fall away from you and become afflicted, and then come to this house and pray, you would hear our prayers. Verily, you are faithful and emet, true. And when you did offer aid, our fathers were hard-pressed and in low estate, and delivered them out of great dangers. See now, Kodesh Melechim, Kodesh, Holy King, how through our many and great sins we are borne down and made subject to our enemies, and are become weak and powerless. We, being in this low condition, this bold and profane man seeks to dishonor your Kodesh place, consecrated out of the Eretz, the earth, to Hashem, to the name of your majesty, your dwelling place, and heaven, Shamayim of heavens, is indeed unapproachable to men. But since it seems good to you to exhibit your glory, your kavod among your people Yisrael, you did sanctify this place. Punish us not by means of this zarat, uncleanness of their men, nor chaste us by means of their profanity, lest the Torahless ones should boast in their rage and exult in exuberant pride of speech, and say, we have trampled upon the holy house as idolatrous houses are trampled upon. Blot out our iniquities and do away with our errors, and show forth your compassion, your chesed, in this hour. Let your mercies, quickly go before us. Grant us peace, shalom, that the cast down and broken-hearted may praise you with their mouths. At that time, Elohim, who sees all things, who is beyond all, Kodesh among the Kodesh, holy among the holy, heard that prayer so suitably, and scourged the man greatly, uplifted with scorn and insolence, shaking him to and fro as a reed is shaken with the wind. He cast him upon the pavement, powerless, with limbs paralyzed, by a righteous judgment deprived of the faculty of speech. His friends and bodyguards, beholding the swift recompense which had suddenly overtaken him, struck with exceeding terror, and fearing that he would die, speedily removed him. When in course of time he had come to himself, this severe check caused no repentance, teshuvah, within him, but he departed with bitter threatenings. He proceeded to Mitzrayim, grew worse in wickedness, through his before-mentioned companions in wine, whom were lost to all goodness, and not satisfied with the countless acts of impiety. His audacity so increased that he raised evil reports there, and many of his friends, watching his purpose attentively, joined in furthering his will. His purpose was to indict a public stigma upon our race. Wherefore he erected a pillar at the tower porch and caused the following inscription to be engraved upon it, semicolon. That entrance to their own temple was to be refused to all those who would not sacrifice, that all the Yuhadim were to be registered among the common people, that those who resisted were to be forcibly seized and put to death, that those who were thus registered were to be marked on their persons by the ivy leaf of Dionysus, a tattoo, and to be set apart with these limited rights. To do away with the appearance of hating them, he had it written underneath that if any of them should enter into the community of the initiated rites, that they should have equal rights of the Alexandrians. Some of those who were over the city, thereby abhorring any approach of the piety of unabstainably, gave to the king an unexpected and derive some great honor of the future connection. A nobler ruach, however, prompted the majority to cling to their religious observances, and by paying money that they might live unmolested, these sought to escape the registration, cheerfully looking forward to future aid. They abhorred their own apostates, considering them to be national foes, and debarring. Third book of Maccabees, chapter 3. On discovering this, so incensed was the wicked king that he no longer confined his rage to Yehudim in Alexandria, laying his hands more heavily upon those who lived in the country. He gave orders that they should be quickly collected into one place, and most cruelly deprived of their lives. While this was going on, an invidious rumor was uttered abroad by men who had banded together to injure the Yehudic race, The purport of their charge was that the Yuhadim kept them away from the ordinances of the Torah. Now, while the Yuhadim always maintained a feeling of unswerving loyalty towards the kings, yet as they worshipped Elohim and observed his Torah, they made certain distinctions and avoided certain things. Hence, some persons held them in odium, although as they endured their conversations with works of righteousness, they had established themselves in the good opinion of the world. What all the rest of mankind said was, however, made of no account by the foreigners, who said much of the exclusiveness of the Yuhadim with regard to their worship and meats. They alleged that they were men unsociable, hostile to the king's interests, refusing to associate with him or his troops. By this way of speaking, they brought much odium upon them. Nor was this unexpected uproar and sudden conflux in people unobserved by the Yavanim who lived in the city, concerning men who had never harmed them, yet to aid them was not in their power, since all was oppression around. But they encouraged them in their troubles, and expected a favorable turn of affairs. He who knows all things will not, said they, disregard so great a people. Some of the neighbors, friends, and fellow dealers of the Yuhadim even called them secretly to an interview, pledged them as their assistants, and promised to do their utmost for them. Now the king, elated with the prosperous fortune and not regarding the superior power of Elohim, but thinking to preserve in his present purpose, wrote the following sefer to the prejudice of the Yuhadim. King Ptolemy, my Philopater, to the commanders and soldiers in Mitzrayim and in all places, health and happiness. I am right well, and so too are my affairs, since our Astric campaign, the particulars of which ye know about, and which by the aid of the Elohim not lightly given, and by our own vigor, has been brought to a successful issue. According to our expectations, we resolve not with the strength of spear, but with greatness and compassion, as it were to nurse the inhabitants of Koel, Aram, and Phoenicia, and to their willing benefactors. So having bestowed considerable sums of money upon the temples of the several cities, we proceeded as far as Yerushalayim, and went up to honor the temple of these wretched beings who never cease from their folly. To outward appearance, they received us willingly, but believed that appearance by their deeds, when we were eager to enter their temple and to honor it with the most beautiful and exquisite gifts. They were so carried away by their old arrogance as to forbid us the entrance, while we at our forbearance towards all men refrain from exercising our power upon them, and thus exhibiting their enmity against us. They alone among the nations lift up their heads against king and benefactors as men unwilling to submit to anything reasonable. We then, having endeavored to make allowances for the madness of these persons, and on our victorious return, treating all people in Mitzrayim courteously, acted in a manner which was befitting. Accordingly, bearing no ill will against their kinsmen at Jerusalem, but rather remembering our connection with them, and the numerous matters with sincere heart from the remote period entrusted to them, we wish to venture a total alteration of their state by bestowing upon them the rights of citizens of Alexandria, and to admit them to the everlasting rights of our solemnity. All this, however, they have taken in a very different ruach. With their innate malignity, they have spurned the fair offer, and constantly inclining to evil. They rejected the insubmergible rights. Not only so, but by using speech and by refraining from speech, they abhor the few among them who are heartily disposed towards us, ever deeming that their ignorable course of procedure will force us to do away with our reform. Having then received certain proofs that the Yehudim bear us every sort of ill will, we must look forward to the possibilities of some sudden tumult amongst ourselves, when these impious men may turn traitors and barbarous enemies. As soon, therefore, as the contents of the cipher become known to you in that same hour, we order those Yehudim who dwell among you, with women and children, to be sent to us, vilified and abused, in chains of iron, to undergo a death, cruel and magnanimous, suitable to men disaffected. For by the punishment of one of them in one body, we perceive that we have found the only means of establishing our affairs for the future of a firm and satisfactory basis. Whosoever shall shield a Yehudi, whether it be man or child or suckling, shall with his whole house be tortured to death. Whosoever shall inform against the Yehudim, besides receiving the property of the person charged, shall be present in 2,000 drachma, and from the royal treasury shall be made, and shall be crowned. Whatever place or shelter a Yehudim, when he is turned forth, hunted forth, be put under the ban of fire, and forever rendered less to every living being for all time to come. Such was the purport of the king's Sefer. Third Maccabees, chapter 4. Wherever this decree was received, the people kept up a revelry of joy and shouting, as if their long pent-up, hardened hatred were now to show itself openly. The Yehudim suffered great throes of sorrow, and wept much, while their hearts, all things being around being lamentable, were set on fire, and they bewailed the sudden destruction which was decreed against them. What home, or city, or place at all inhabited, or what streets were there, with their condition did not fill with wailing and lamentations. They were sent out unanimously by the generals in the several cities, with such stern and pitiless feelings, that the exceptional nature of the infliction moved even some of their enemies. These, influenced by sentiments of common man and reflected upon the uncertain issues of life, shed a tear at their miserable expulsion. A multitude of aged, gray-haired old men were driven along with the halting, bending feet